they said Gandhi could stand in front of hundreds of thousands of people, just wait, and pretty soon it would get quiet. Yeah, I'm not Gandhi, but first of all, I'd like to apologize if I waver and act like I'm drunk. I'm not. On Wednesday, I got hit by some sort of a virus in my inner ear, and I actually was in the ER for a while. They did $1 million checkup, and my brain is okay. So that's good to know. Yeah.
At least like it was before.
I may sit down in a moment, but for the time being, I'll stand up. A couple things. To begin with, I don't know the truth. I have my version of the truth, and I'll kind of speak my truth. It's up to you to figure out what you think is true and what isn't. First of all, I'd like to, the young woman who did the activity outside, she disappeared. There she is again. I'm sorry, what's your name?
Dee.
Dee? I thought Dee did an excellent job, by the way. And she kind of made my life easier because I was going to, my topic is debriefing. I mean, debriefing, processing, reflections, they're all about the same concept. And what I'd like to do is kind of maybe change the word of debriefing a bit. As I think through this, debriefing actually came from after the military did a, what do they call it when they go out and do a mission and maneuver or whatever, they'd come back and debrief what went right, what didn't go well. And so reflection really more to me is meaningful. And why do we do it to begin with? And I'd rather have this to be interactive as opposed to me lecturing. So why do we do reflections or process or reflect back on what happened?
To be able to learn from it, do it better next time.
Okay, very good. And I like that because I'm assuming that you do more than one activity at Rutland. And the same thing happens when you talk about bringing in speakers. Somewhere, somehow, doesn't it make sense to process or to reflect back on what that speaker had to say? Now, the speaker may have been really poor, may have done a very bad job, but a good friend of mine would keep honing back in all the time. His name was Kevin Farrell, and Kevin was a mentor to me, and he would say it isn't whether the speaker was good or bad, because we would rate, should we bring this speaker back or whatever. The question is, what was the message? Even if it was delivered poorly, what was the message? What do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? Have some sort of discussion about that topic, as opposed to whether they were a good speaker or not. Now, obviously, a good speaker, a person that can capture the attention of the conferees, it's that much better, right? So, what is that process? The process, you do the activity, or there's a speaker, one of the two, and then you go back and you try to figure out what happened. And here's a couple things about debriefing, from my perspective. If I'm the junior counselor or the person running the facilitation, the less I speak, the better it is. And here's why I like to be in a circle. I like to be in a circle because they're talking to each other. And I'd like to get them to stop talking to me. I may introduce the conversation, but they're talking among themselves. And one of the concepts that I throw out to you is, if I hope I don't fall down here, is a concept of weight. People don't like silence, and they'll fill it in. So a lot of times, if you're running the facilitation, and the kids, there's a silence, one of those kids is liable to fill it in. W-A-I-T. Why am I talking? So if I remember back and I ask myself to wait for a moment, and I ask myself, why am I talking? So maybe I should be, and maybe there's a reason for it, and I should bring it back up. One of the things that might be important is if it looks like, it sounds like, people don't understand what the question was. I throw that out. The next part of that is, thanks for somebody bringing the podium, I can lean on it. If they have a conversation, your biggest job is to facilitate keeping it on task. If you can keep it, and people talk about, in coaching, we talk about peeling back the onion to get to the heart, get to the middle of it, right? So the questions are to be spiraled back into, well, what does that mean? All kinds of good questions, and I can provide a whole bunch of info if you'd like. I'd rather talk about an artichoke. It's much sweeter when you get to the middle of it. So it's like you keep peeling it back, so that if you can keep a conversation, once it gets going, I like to keep it that way, to keep it on that same highway, if you will, so that you keep getting more learning and more learning about that particular aspect, until it seems like it's lost energy. When it's lost energy, then you can go back and ask maybe a different question. We had a guy come in and talk to our group, and we did a thing called the Walk of Possibilities. And he would put a dot on a board. Look at it, I fall that way. And then he would ask the kids, what is that? And for a lot of time, that's a blue dot on a white board, or whatever, and they keep staying on it. And his whole point is that when you're young, you have an open mind. So it's no longer just exactly that, it's a metaphor for something. Maybe it's a blueberry. And so once they get the idea that they can be more open-minded, they just open up totally. The same thing is if you go into a second grade class and ask them what a lake is. They'll tell you what a lake is. You talk to a high school kid, and he thinks he's in school, and he's got to have the exact definition of what that is. And all of a sudden, they kind of shut down. So, if you're having trouble, and the handout that you gave out from Project Adventure, great stuff. But if you ask, you just flat out ask, what happened? There's a lot of times there's a silence. So what I was going to do was I was going to blindfold some people and take them around and we'd do a trust walk. How many do a trust walk? Yeah, it's a great thing. You ever play car?
What's that?
We do car before we do trust walk. But essentially it is one person's blindfolded, the other person gets behind, one person stands out in front with their bumpers, and then you guide them around.
Fast.
So before we, excuse me?
Yeah, fast.
Fast,
Right.
yeah. And so we say we'd like you to have some fun with this thing, but we want to, safety is the #1 thing. So when they go, they're supposed to make sounds. Beep, beep, beep. You know, when they get close to somebody, they go beep, 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 and we tell them, you've got a Mercedes here. You don't want to dent your Mercedes. Keep them in a certain distance. So then, a lot of the debriefing, I noticed that you were really trusting in the situation. You really trusted your partner. What created that? Why did that happen? So you started the conversation about trust. You had a desired outcome. And so I noticed something about that. And what has to happen if you go about doing that, you have to pay attention to what's going on. You have to notice something that's happening. You might say, I noticed that some of you were fearful. Anything that you might see. Where else and I'd like to keep it one extra thing here, and that is, where else at Ryla have you really began to trust? What created that trust? Why did you begin to trust here? And then you can go later on to the last part. Where in your life should you trust people? What are you losing by not trusting people in your life? What are the risks all those kind of good things. So it kind of goes into a cycle. But what I would like to do at Riley is I would like them to be able to go from one activity to another activity and have them progress. If that's possible. If they can remember what happened in the last activity that they learned from it, about trust or whatever. But one of the things that we've come up with, and this came from Timothy Galway, who was maybe one of the first actual professional coaches. And he came up with the acronym STOP. So my next question is, when do you debrief? When do you process? After the activity. Well, I would like to make, especially when we do Ebola, and Ebola is the toxic waste that some of you may do, I would like them to be able to learn something from it, not just the fact that they failed. So STOP comes from is the acronym Stop, Think, Organize, and Proceed. So in the middle of we teach them to be able to call a stop anytime they want. Well, they forget about it and don't do that. But you can do that. You can call a stop. So once they've learned the acronym, you can stop, think. So what do you mean by think? Well, how are things going? And you can easily say, are things going really well? Put your thumbs up. If things aren't going very well, then thumbs down. If it's somewhere in between, then put your thumb to the side. Well, when they put their thumb to the side, you can ask, well, what could make it better? Think about what's going on that would make this situation better. And then they can talk together among themselves about different strategies. This strategy isn't working. When you're telling me to pick up, when I'm blindfolded, you tell me to pick up the blue ribbon, I don't know which one to pick up. So you begin to work on maybe one of your objectives in toxic waste is communication, right? You want knocking it down?
I didn't want to fall.
Oh, thanks. Okay, so then you organize it, you get what you're going to do, and then you proceed. So one of the things that you can do is to process during the activity. Another way of processing during that activity, which I got from a friend of mine named Leo Shepherd. One of the things that's so good about processing, reflecting, debriefing, whatever you want to call it, one of the most important parts of that is the fact that you are building a team. You're getting everybody to become more cohesive. So in the process of doing that, if they acknowledge each other during the activity, wouldn't it be good if doing toxic waste, instead of saying don't do this, don't do that, that slows people down. That slows people down. You can tell them what not to do, that makes me freeze. But if you tell me I'm doing well, and what I'm doing well, then I can do the job better. So one of the things that they will not do, especially at the start, is they won't acknowledge each other at the start. They don't know what's going. They don't know how to do that. So you could model that. You could model acknowledging them. Dave, nice job. You're moving in the right direction. Dave, move a little bit to your left. Good job. If you start getting them to acknowledge what's going on, and all of a sudden over here, Bill says something that's fairly important. Good noticing about that, Bill. If you start doing it and let them know that you're modeling what would be good for them as a group, they can then become processing during the activity by acknowledging each other. What's that going to do to your team cohesiveness? It's going to really increase it. It would be fabulous if you could, by the end of the week, be doing activities, and you just got it started. You told them the story about these magic little, what did you call them?
Spaceships?
Yeah, spaceships. If you could tell them about that, and they could just take off on it. But they're not, hey, we're not teaching really teaching a full course of leadership. It's not going to happen in 5 days, and some of you may be doing it in just a weekend. But what you're doing is you're trying to teach the skills of how they can develop good teams. So that's an idea that you might try and use. But you know, you're going to need to tell them that you're modeling it. Otherwise, they're expecting you to do that all the time. We do river crossing, which is very similar to what you do. And as we do that, we've started out by having them on one side of the river talking about all the things that they've learned. While we're setting it up, they're talking about all the things they've learned during the week. So that the junior counselor now is making sure that they're having those conversations. We then bring in a leader from each one of the teams. And that leader then talks to the other leaders about their strategy. And their strategy is always decent. But at the same time, they're missing some ideas. So they go back to their teams and tell their teams what this group thought about. Do you have any ideas? They come up with maybe an idea, they come back, and they share that idea to the whole team. So as they do that, then they go back and they start. And do they screw up and have to go back over and over and over again? Yeah. Sooner or later, somebody calls a stop. Hopefully it's them again, so that they can come back. Oh, the leaders can come back and say, what's going wrong? Or some of them are so narrow-minded and have blinders on that they don't see what's going on, and another team over there is really doing well. But so that they can then come back and say, hey, we noticed you're not doing well. Here's an idea you might be able to use. So by the end of the week, they did a fabulous job this last year. Really did. And we didn't do much about it at all. They were doing it on their own. So let me see.
On that, all 10 or 12 teams have to cross the river and onto the bank at exactly the same time. So you have 120 kids.
Their strategy also has to be, okay, who's going to do the signal? Who's going to signal it? And or count it down, or whatever it is. You usually want to count down so that they have it right. Another thing that we haven't done as much as I would like, but is called think, pair, share. All you educators know think, pair, share. But that's an excellent way to get everybody involved in your processing or your reflection time. What I mean by that is you think about, okay, you may ask some question like, what did we just experience here, or whatever. Now the what, so what, now what works better. So now you think about what it was that happened. The other thing then is they share it with somebody. Talk to somebody in your group. Then maybe you could expand it. So first there was one, then there's two, then there's four. So then the four of you talk about it, and then you share, somebody from that group of four shares what they thought was going on, and share their experience. So I think that would be a lot better than what we've done before. Reconstruct the experience is another way of doing it. So what was the first thing that happened? And you get somebody to start explaining what went on, and so that hits some brainwaves somewhere, and they begin to notice what happened at the start. And then what happened? Well, Kurt said this that really was helpful, and so you can then start building on what happened next, and then what was the strategy next. And then you're starting to reflect back on what was learned. That's the whole key thing, is being able to reconstruct what happened so you can remember what happened, so the next time you can build off of what you learned. Riley, what is this? Riley, youth? Leadership. Oh, so I noticed that Junior really was a good leader in this last experience. Can you tell me what Junior did that made her such a good leader? So you start talking, you always bring, if you can, it's always good to bring back something about leadership. And by the way, leadership isn't always from the front, it's from the back a lot of times, right? So that leadership sometimes is about being a good follower and being able to synergize and bring that. There's another part you can do, and that is create some sort of a movement. One of the things that you can do is get all the people who learned something at one end or saw expressed it as one way, other people expressed it the opposite way. This was a good experience, this is a bad experience, and then start to be able to discuss where they are in the line, of different opinions. One other thing that I think that we've learned from toxic leaders, and that is front loading. I mean, if you're going to tell people you're going to do a trust walk, I mean, are you telling them the objective? Yeah, I mean, in the name of it, you're working on trust, right? But in toxic waste, some of you may not know it, but you blindfold some people and you set them off in the corner someplace, and then you take another group and they have some apparatus that they have to place around a bucket that's got a koosh ball on the top, and they've got to get the blindfolded people to come over to the bucket and put the apparatus around the bucket and carry it away. So what's happening with the people over there that are blindfolded while those people are learning what the activity is? So what we've tried to do is talk to the people who are blindfolded about what is leadership, what does it take to be a good leader, what does it take to, and we talk about leaders and followers and so forth, and we talk about communication. We tell them it's going to be important that you be able to communicate well in this activity. The communication goes well. So if you can have these kind of front-loading conversations, then the rear end processing becomes a little better. I guess you could process at the end by telling them exactly what they learned.
That's less fun.
Less meaningful, isn't it? So, I'll leave you with that. The other part of that I wanted to kind of share with you is that at Young Rilo, we have objectives. How many have written down the objectives in your comments? Really, do you do a pre-test and a post-test? Here's what we've done. As we've written out all of our objectives, and I'll share them